Islam is the second largest and fastest growing religion in the entire world. Not surprisingly, there are many nations that are identified as Muslim nations. But which of these countries are the most powerful when it comes to military power? In determining the power of each of these countries, I just looked at the military strengths, but they're not ranked in any particular order. The first country I'm talking about is Morocco, and the latest numbers show that they had a defense budget of $3.46 billion. Morocco's total population is 33,986,655. Its available manpower is 17 million, with 373,000 total military personnel and 198,000 active personnel. As reserve personnel, they have 175,000 people. But it's really challenged because it has one of the lowest defense budgets in the entire Middle East. The country's military has been heavily engaged with the disputed Western Sahara territory, as well as patrolling its long borders. Recently, it also supported the Saudi-led coalition fighting in Yemen. So a lot going on for them, but with that defense budget, it's just a big stretch. On to Syria with a defense budget of $1.87 billion. After more than 6 years of a lot of fighting, Syria's military is a shadow of what it used to be. But I mean, these guys are fighters. Syria has a total population of 18,028,549 people, and they have an available manpower of 11,600,000 men. Their total military personnel sits at 304,000. Out of that, their active personnel is 154,000, and their reserve personnel sits at 150,000. Its military is bolstered by Iranian militias, Russian forces, and local private militias to keep the Assad regime after suffering from heavy losses, rampant desertion, and general fatigue just being involved in so many wars. Now, the next country I want to look at is Malaysia with a total defense budget of $4.7 billion. While Malaysia has never fought in a conventional conflict or war before, it does boast a modern military with a balanced strategic posture between naval strength, technology, as well as air superiority. The country of Malaysia has a population of 31,381,902 people, and they have an available manpower of 15 million. Their total military personnel is 420,000, and that's broken up into active personnel, which sits at 110,000, as well as reserve personnel that sits at 310,000. But one conflict that Malaysia is involved in is the dispute over China's claim over the South China Sea. Malaysia is also an active member of the UN peacekeeping forces. While struggling with financial limitations and currency instability, its military continues to grow and modernize. It faces the challenge of matching assets that are incompatible with the domestic and international threats that they're facing. The next Middle Eastern country I want to look at is Algeria. Now, they have a much higher defense budget than their previous nations. They sit at $10.6 billion. Algeria is the largest Arab country by size and has invested steadily in its military since it achieved independence. Algeria's population is 40,969,443, and out of their total population, their available manpower is 20,400,000 people. Currently, their total military personnel is 792,350, and out of that, their active personnel is 520,000, and their reserve personnel is 272,350. The Algerian People's National Army has been on active footing since its founding, first fighting for independence, a civil war dubbed the Black Decade, followed by more than 2 decades protecting its major borders. It's also the only country, aside from China, that obtained the Russian S-400 missile system, and it's one of the best air defense systems that's currently out there. Algeria has troublesome borders with neighbors including Libya, Mali, and it also actively supports the Polisario Front, which seeks the independence of the disputed territory of Western Sahara from the country of Morocco. Now let's fly over to Saudi Arabia. They have a defense budget of $69.41 billion. The Saudi Arabian military is the best armed defense military in the region. Saudi Arabia has a huge population of 28,500,000 571,770 people. Now, its total military personnel sits at 256,000, and they have 231 active personnel and 25,000 personnel in reserve. In the past year, it has fought an intense war in Yemen as a head of an allied coalition. While Yemen has been a proving ground for its military, the drawn-out war has drawn significant international condemnation over the heavy human toll that it's been taken, as well as the humanitarian concerns. We have famine, we got disease going on there, and the country is just really ravaged by war. So we're halfway there now, and it's time to look at Pakistan. Pakistan has an estimated defense budget of $7 billion. Pakistan's military is very robust and it has a long-standing military tradition. And in recent years, it has leveraged stronger engagement with Saudi Arabia and China to modernize its forces with heavy military technology exchange and weapons development. The population at Pakistan is an estimated 204,924,861. Their total military personnel is almost a million at 919,000 people. And when you break it down, 637,000 are active personnel and 282,000 are reserve personnel. When you look at Pakistan operationally, Pakistan boasts one of the largest armies in the region with a strong combined arms doctrine supported by a powerful intelligence service and a consistent drive to develop defense industry capacities and manufacture modern firearms and ammunition. It is also one of the few countries in the region with nuclear capability. The Arms Control Association puts Pakistan's nuclear stockpile at about 140 weapons. So with that number, they have the 6th largest nuclear arsenal in the entire world. Now I want to look at the country of Indonesia. They have an estimated defense budget of $6.9 billion, with Indonesia set to become the world's 4th largest economy by the year 2050. Its military continues to grow in leaps and bounds. Aside from its active duty personnel, it is home to an additional 281,000 paramilitary personnel. So that's a lot of people. Indonesia has an even larger population than Pakistan, sitting at 260,580,739 people. Their available manpower is 130 million, and their total military personnel sits at 975,750. Their active personnel is 435,750 people, and reserve personnel is 540,000. When you look at their manpower, their economy, and their political clout, that's more than enough to ensure internal stability and growth. Recently, Indonesia applied for an anti-access area denial, which is commonly called an A2D2 strategy, and that gave Indonesia even more leverage over its neighboring countries. Indonesia's modernized capabilities may in fact be the precursor to larger regional ambitions in its future. We have 3 more nations to look at, and the third final one is the country of Iran. Iran has a defense budget of $14 billion. With more men in arms than any other country in the Middle East, with an additional 125,000 in its Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. Based on the latest estimates, Iran's population is 82,021,564. And out of their total population, they have 47 million people as available manpower. Now, their actual total military personnel sits at 934,000, and that's divided into active personnel, which is a total of 534,000, and reserve personnel at 400,000. Iran has also been able to effectively manage large militias while aligning them with its overall powerful military posture through tried and tested embedded officers and leadership. Over years of sanctions, Iran developed a significant national defense industry and made major progress towards becoming a nuclear state. And their armed forces just proved to be very strong. Iran has even provided extensive technical and military support to the Assad regime in Syria, as well as support in Yemen. The second last country that I'm looking at is Egypt, with a defense budget of $2.7 billion. Egypt has a total population of 97,041,072 people. Their available manpower is 42 million. Egypt's total military personnel is at 1,329,250, with 454,250 as active personnel and 875,000 as reserve personnel. With the rise of the president Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, Additionally, the Egyptian military has been given free rein to expand and embed itself in nearly every aspect of Egyptian society, on top of having a larger defense budget, tax exemptions, and lucrative private contracts. The Egyptian military has made major progress in modernizing its military since Sisi took power, with gradual procurements of new state-of-the-art weapons, as well as revamped supply chains and more attention given to its navy. Egypt is still struggling, however, to deal with the insurgents in the Sinai Peninsula for several years. And the last but not least country that we gotta look at is the country of Turkey. Turkey's defense budget sits at $10.2 billion. The total population of Turkey is 80,845,215, and they have an available manpower of 41,640,000 people. Their total military personnel is at 710,565, with the active personnel at 350,000 and reserve personnel at 360,565. Turkey's armed forces have been active for a number of years. On top of its heavy presence in Syria, Turkey has developed a strong defense industry, manufacturing autonomous armed drones, state-of-the-art cruise missiles. On top of that, a cutting-edge indigenous battle tank and battle-tested attack helicopters ready to roll. While Turkey ranks as the strongest military force in the Muslim world and the Middle East, it was also ranked in the 9th spot overall, like for all the countries in the entire world. The top 10 Muslim armies in the entire world. And now the first nation I'm going to start off with is Turkey. When it comes to the Turkish army, sources trace the army's foundation back to the Modu Chanyu of the Xiongnu Empire in 209 BC. But of course, modern history of the army began after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. Now, numbers as recent as 2015 report that the Turkish army, along with the rest of the entire Turkish military, have seen a huge growth in their personnel strength, and these numbers are comparable to their strength back in the 2000s. A big contributing factor for this type of growth is the destabilization of Syria as well as Iraq. Now, the Turkish army's motto is peace at home, peace in the world. Turkey's total combat tanks are 3,200, and they have a total of 9,500 armored fighting vehicles. Their self-propelled artillery sit at a total of 1,120, and they have 1,272 towed artillery and 350 rocket projectors. The next nation's army I'm looking at is the nation of Pakistan. So the Pakistan army is a volunteer service, and their primary objective, as well as its constitutional mission, is to really just make sure that the national security and the national unity of Pakistan is really kept in check. It conducts a lot of humanitarian rescue operations at home, as well as participates in a lot of peacekeeping missions which are mandated by the United Nations overseas. Now, the two main branches of the army are the combat arms and the administrative services. All of them consist of several different branches that include army officers, junior commissioned officers, as well as other enlisted personnel. Their motto is a follower of none but Allah, the fear of Allah, strive for Allah. Pakistan's army has 2,200 combat tanks, 3,665 armored fighting vehicles, 429 self-propelled artillery. Their towed artillery count is 1,226, and they have 150 rocket projectors in their possession. The next nation to look at is Egypt. So the Egyptian army is the largest service branch within the Egyptian armed forces. The Egyptian armed forces chief of staff's office is in Cairo, and he's the chief of staff of the entire army. There's 3 command and control headquarters and 9 command and control field headquarters, and they're directed from the chief of staff's office. The most notable engagements of the Egyptian army, these all happened in the 20th century, and they were Egypt's 5 wars with Israel in 1948, 1956, 1967, 1967 to 1970, and also in 1973. The motto of the Egyptian army is, "We painted the face of our nation on our hearts. They have a total of 2,160 combat tanks. Their armored fighting vehicles sit at a total of 5,735. Their self-propelled artillery count is 1,000 even. Their towed artillery, however, is 2,189, and they have 1,100 rocket projectors. Next up, we have Indonesia. So the Indonesian army is composed of a headquarters as well as 15 military region commands and a strategic reserve command called Kostrad, which is a special forces command, as well as a special forces command Kopassus and several other units. There are today 5 types of infantry battalions in the Indonesian army, and those are the Power Raider Infantry Battalion, the Mechanized Raider Infantry Battalion, the Raider Infantry Battalion, the Mechanized Infantry Battalion, and the Infantry Battalion. Their motto is unmatchable bird with noble goals. Their combat tanks sit at a total of 315. Their armored fighting vehicles total 1,300. Now their self-propelled artillery are at 141, their towed artillery 356, and they have 36 rocket projectors. The army of the country of Iran is up next. Now the Iranian army is also known as the Artesh. Now Artesh has its own joint staff, which coordinates its 4 separate service branches, which are the ground forces, the air forces, the navy, and the air defense forces. Their headquarters are in Tehran, Iran, and the Iranian army has fought 2 major invasions in modern era. The first one was back in 1941, and this invasion was by the Soviet and the British forces during the time of World War II. The second was in 1980, and that was the Iraqi invasion, which lasted almost 8 years. Their motto is, and our soldiers, they verily would be the victors. Getting down to the specifics, when we look at their combat tanks, they have 1,634, they have 2,345 armored fighting vehicles, 570 self-propelled artillery, 2,128 towed artillery, and 1,900 rocket projectors. Yeah, they're packing a lot when it comes to the rockets. Okay, moving on to the next country is Saudi Arabia. So the Saudi Arabian army is the largest branch of the Saudi Arabian armed forces. Now, I didn't really find a motto for the Saudi Arabian army, but I did find a motto for Saudi Arabia as a country, and it is, there is no God but God. Muhammad is the messenger of God. The Saudi army has been active since 1745, and that was when it was an independent service arm. But of course, it's now been an official branch of the armed forces since 1902. And in the year 2000, the Saudi Arabian government, they spent billions of dollars to expand Saudi's forces, including their army, of course. But unfortunately, there's a lot of modern equipment that they had to learn and really introduce into their army. And a lot of the equipment is still not properly understood or even used to this day. Nevertheless, the Saudis have a very powerful army. They have 1,062 combat tanks, 11,100 armored fighting vehicles. Their self-propelled artillery totals 705. Their towed artillery is at 1,818, and their rocket projectors sit at 122. The next country in this list is Algeria. So the Algerian army includes 2 armored and 3 mechanized divisions. Land Forces Command is really responsible for organizing and preparing the land forces so as to ensure the defense of the national land space in cooperation with the other forces in Algeria. Now, the organization of Algeria's land forces is made up of a central command, military and operational sectors, big units, and autonomous units, as well as you'll find training institutions. Now, a lot of their equipment was provided by Russia and various other countries. And the motto for Algeria as a nation is by the people and for the people. Their combat tanks sit at a total of 2,475. They have 6,900 armored fighting vehicles. Their self-propelled artillery total at 400. Their towed artillery is at 583, and they have 367 rocket projectors. And then Malaysia is our next nation. So the King of Malaysia is the supreme commander of the Malaysian Armed Forces, and the Malaysian Army currently has 17 corps or regiments. Now, these are grouped into 3 main components: the combat element, then there is the combat support element, and then the support element. So the corps and regiments are currently organized into 5 divisions. The first military units in Malaysia can be traced all the way back to March 1861. And then fast forward a bunch of years, the modern Malaysian Army came into existence in January 1933. And their motto is strong and loyal. The Malaysian Army has 74 combat tanks in their possession. They have a total of 1,460 armored fighting vehicles. Their self-propelled artillery sit at 29, and their towed artillery total 211, and they have 54 rocket projectors in their possession. So now coming down to the end of this list, we have Syria. The Syrian army makes up approximately 80% of the combined services. It officially came into existence in 1945 before Syria obtained full independence the following year. And what we know about the Syrian armed forces is that they have really been involved in suppressing a lot of the political movements within Syria. Their motto is Guardians of the Homeland. They have 5,035 combat tanks, 5,170 armored fighting vehicles, 500 self-propelled artillery. Their towed artillery total at 2,210, and they have 700 rocket projectors. First up at number 10, we have the country of Morocco and their Air Force. So the Royal Moroccan Air Force was formed back in November 19th, 1956. And since then, the force began to steadily expand up until the year 1980 and early 1980s. French aircraft are the predominant aircraft sold to Morocco since the year 1956, and they estimate that the total value of French aircraft that was sold between 1974 to 1982 to Morocco was valued at $1.5 billion. Well, miraculously $1.5 billion to $2 billion, somewhere in between there. Now, Morocco's total aircraft strength is at 291. They have a total of 61 fighter aircraft, also 61 attack aircraft, and they have 31 transport aircraft, 79 trainers, and their total helicopter strength is at 113, and they do not have any attack helicopters. Next country to look at is Iraq. So the Iraqi Air Force, or the IQAF, also known as the IRAF, was founded on April 22nd, 1931. Now, before the creation of this new Air Force, the RAF Iraq Command was in charge of all of the British Armed Forces elements inside the country of Iraq in the 1920s and the early 1930s. It's responsible for policing international borders as well as surveillance of national assets. And now the Iraqi Air Force also acts as a support force for the Iraqi Navy as well as the Iraqi Army. Now their total aircraft strength is at 327. They have 26 fighter aircraft, 59 attack aircraft, 24 transport aircraft, 78 trainer aircraft. Iraq has a total helicopter strength of 179, and they have 32 attack helicopters in their possession. Moving on now to number 8, the country of Indonesia and their Air Force. So the Indonesian Air Force was founded on April 9th, 1946, and it has its headquarters in Jakarta, Indonesia. The Indonesian Air Force has its ground force unit, and that is called the Air Force Special Corps. Their helicopter strength is a total of 451, and in their possession they have 41 fighter aircraft, 65 attack aircraft, 62 transport aircraft, and they have a total of 104 trainers. Indonesia has a total helicopter strength of 192, and in that they have 8 attack helicopters. Syria is up next. Now the Syrian Air Force was established in the year 1948, and this was after the first class of pilots graduated from the French-run flight school located at the Estabel airfield in Lebanon, and their Air Force was also greatly established with the help of aircraft that were left behind by the French military. So when you look at Syria's stats, we see that they have a total aircraft strength of 457. They have 200 fighter aircraft, 133 attack aircraft, 4 transport aircraft, and 67 trainers. As well as their helicopter strength is at 166, and they got 28 attack helicopters. Okay, now next up is the Islamic Republic of Iran and their Air Force. Now this was formed when the former Imperial Iranian Air Force, or the IIAF, was renamed. Now this happened after the Islamic Revolution that took place in Iran in February 1979. Now their Air Force has purchased many Soviet and Chinese aircraft, as well as some home-built aircraft in order to really maintain their forces. Iran's total helicopter strength is at 509. When we look at their fighter aircraft, that number sits at 142. They have 165 attack aircraft, 89 transport aircraft, 104 trainer aircrafts, and a total helicopter strength of 126, and 12 attack helicopters. Moving on now, at number 5, we have the country of Algeria. So the Algerian military aviation was really created to support the fight of the People's National Army against the French occupying forces. Now this came as part of the decision of the Summum Congress that was held on October 20th, 1956, and that's when the recommendation of a long-term plan to form a modern army was pitched. Their fighter aircraft total at 103. They have 113 attack aircraft, 58 transport aircraft, 85 trainers, 284 is their total helicopter strength, and they have 46 attack helicopters. Now, number 4, the next Air Force we're looking at is the Royal Saudi Air Force, or the RSAF. Now, this was founded in June 1916. Now, the RSAF was developed from a largely defensive military force into one that is very advanced in terms of its offensive capabilities, and it also has the third most F-15s in their possession, next to USA and Japan. Their total aircraft strength is 848, with 244 fighter aircraft, 325 attack aircraft, 49 transport aircraft, 207 trainers. Their total helicopter strength is at 254, and they have 34 attack helicopters. Okay, now we're into the top 3. Now these countries are super powerful. At number 3, we have the country of Turkey and their Air Force. So the Turkish Air Force dates back to 1911, when it was founded by the Ottoman Empire. Now Turkey's modern Air Force, however, was not formed until the year 1923, when the Republic of Turkey was created. The Turkish Air Force has an active strength of over 60,000 military personnel, and now their total aircraft strength is 1,067. They have 207 fighter aircraft, also 207 attack aircraft. They have 87 transport aircraft and 289 trainers, as well as a total helicopter strength of 492 and 94 attack helicopters. Moving on now to number 2, it's the country of Egypt and the Egyptian Air Force. So the EAF was part of the Egyptian army in the year 1932, and then from there it became an independent service branch in the year 1937. Now the Air Force's motto is higher and higher for the sake of glory. And now they live true to that because they're ranked number 2 in the Muslim world. The primary role of the EAF is the air defense of Egypt, and their secondary role is their strike as well as army operation support. The EAF also provides official government transport as well as carries out international search and rescue operations in the Red Sea as well as the Mediterranean Sea and different parts of the desert. So their total aircraft strength is 1,092. They have 211 fighter aircraft, 341 attack aircraft, 59 transport aircraft, 388 trainers, 293 is their total helicopter strength, and Egypt has 46 attack helicopters. Now the number 1 most powerful Muslim Air Force in the world is Pakistan. Now the Pakistani Air Force, or the PAF, was founded on August 14th, 1947. Now its primary role and mission is to, and I quote, to provide, in synergy with other inter-services, the most efficient, assured, and cost-effective aerial defense of Pakistan. The PAF has a total of 70,000 plus personnel and operates over 1,300 aircraft. And just to give you a specific breakdown, their total aircraft strength is 1,342. They have 348 fighter aircraft. Pakistan has a total of 438 attack aircraft, 51 transport aircraft, 499 trainer aircraft, and a total helicopter strength of 322, as well as 55 attack helicopters. I looked specifically at military power. I didn't factor in any international alliances that these countries may have or their economic power. So let's just get into this list. Starting at number 10, we have the nation of Iraq. Iraq has dropped a lot of its military spending recently, and now the country's military has made significant gains in recent years in battles against enemy militants. They have been helped and assisted by the United States as well as other Western powers, and also they've received a lot of military advice from Iran's Al-Quds Brigade. Since the implementation of the United States-Iraq Status of Forces Agreement back on January 1st, 2009, the Iraqi military, as well as the forces of the Ministry of Interior, are responsible for providing security as well as upholding law in all of Iraq. Their total military personnel sit at 165,000, and they have a defense budget of $1.73 billion. The nation of Bangladesh comes in at number 9. So Bangladesh's defense budget, it actually accounts for about 6% of the entire national budget. And Bangladesh is located between 3 nuclear states. Now they share a 4,156 border with India, as well as they're close to China and Pakistan. And its military also helps to maintain internal security and looking after both national security and stability. As well as they have to attend to international disaster relief through the UN and also UN peacekeeping missions. So they keep busy, they have to constantly be on their toes. They never know what's going to happen, especially in their location. Now, over the past decade, Bangladesh has continued to expand its military arsenal by expanding ammunition manufacturing, as well as purchasing fighter aircraft, and even added some submarines. Now, their total military personnel sit at 160,000, and they have a defense budget of $3.8 billion. Number 8 brings us Malaysia. While Malaysia has never really fought in a conventional conflict before, it does have a pretty modern military, and it balances its strategic posture between naval strength, technological modernization, as well as their air superiority. Now, Malaysia is in dispute with China's claim over the South China Sea, as well as it's an active member of UN peacekeeping forces. Now, while they struggle with financial limitations as well as currency instability, its military does continue to grow and modernize surprisingly. It does face a lot of challenges of matching assets that are incompatible with the domestic and international threats that they face. Nevertheless, they have a pretty large military force with the total military personnel sitting at 410,000, but their defense budget is just $4 billion. Algeria comes in at number 7. Algeria is the largest Arab country by size, and it has invested steadily in its military force ever since it achieved independence. The Algerian forces have been on active footing since its founding, first fighting for independence, a civil war dubbed the Black Decade, followed by 2 more decades of protecting its major borders. Now, it's also the only country outside of China that has obtained the Russian S-400 missile system, and it's one of the best air defense systems ever made. Now, Algeria has some troubling borders with neighbors including Libya as well as Mali, and actively supports the Polisario Front, which seeks the independence of the disputed territory of Western Sahara from the country of Morocco. They have 280,000 total military personnel at their disposal, and they fund everything with a $13 billion defense budget. Moving on now to the nation at number 6, we have Saudi Arabia. Now, the Saudi Arabian military is one of the best armed forces in the region. Now, in past years, it has fought a very intense war with Yemen. And while Yemen had been like a testing ground for Saudi Arabia's military, this long and drawn out war has actually drawn significant international condemnation over the heavy human toll that it took, as well as humanitarian concerns over famine and disease in the country. They have drastically increased their military personnel to 803,000, and their defense budget is a whopping $67.6 billion. Let's move on to the nation at number 5, Indonesia. With Indonesia set to become the world's 4th largest economy by the year 2050, its military continues to grow in leaps and bounds. Its manpower, economy, and political clout are enough to ensure internal stability as well as growth as it continues to pursue an aggressive military diversification strategy. Now, recently, it applied an anti-access area denial or A2AD strategy, giving it even stronger leverage over its neighbors. And Indonesia's modernization capabilities may be the precursor to larger regional ambitions in the future. So we just gotta wait and see as this nation continues to expand. Their military personnel sit at 800,000 and their defense budget, $7.6 billion. But that's more than likely gonna increase in the next year. Pakistan comes in at number 4. So the Pakistan military is very robust, very diverse, and it has a long-standing military tradition. In recent years, though, it has leveraged stronger engagement with Saudi Arabia and China to modernize its forces with heavy military technology exchange and weapons development. Now, operationally, Pakistan has one of the largest armies in the entire region. And they're heavily supported by their powerful intelligence service, and they're fueled by a drive to develop their defense industry capacities and manufacturing modern firearms and ammunition. It is also one of the few countries in the region with nuclear capabilities. Now, the Arms Control Association puts Pakistan's nuclear stockpile at about 140 weapons, and that ranks it number 6 in the world when it comes to nuclear weapons. Their total military personnel are 1,204,000, and they have a defense budget at $11.4 billion. Lucky number 3, that goes to Iran. Iran has been able to effectively manage large militias while aligning them with its overall military posture through tried and tested embedded officers and leadership. Now, over years of sanction, Iran developed a significant national defense industry, and it's made major progress towards becoming a nuclear state. Some believe that it already is a nuclear state. Its armed forces are also viewed as being very strong in asymmetric warfare. Iran has also provided extensive technical and military support to the Assad regime in Syria. And with the whole feuding that has developed with the United States, especially at the start of 2020, it looks like Iran is going to be investing a lot more in their military. While currently their total military personnel sit at 873,000 and their defense budget is $19.6 billion. Turkey comes in at number 2. So Turkey's armed forces have been on an active footing for a number of years. On top of its heavy presence over in Syria, Turkey has really developed a strong defense industry, manufacturing autonomous armed drones, as well as state-of-the-art cruise missiles and some amazing indigenous battle tanks, as well as battle-tested attack helicopters. Now, while it ranks as one of the strongest military forces in the Muslim world, as well as the Middle East, so this is why it ranks at number 2 on this list. Turkey has also established large forward operating bases in Qatar and Somalia, expanding its geopolitical reach and force projection capacity. Their total military personnel sit at 735,000 and their defense budget is $19 billion. Unfortunately for them, they did bump down from number 1 to number 2. And we have a new number 1. It's Egypt. Egypt recently bumped to number 1 spot in terms of being the most powerful Muslim nation. And I mean, we saw this coming if you were monitoring Egypt's history, because with the rise of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the Egyptian military has been given free rein to expand and embed itself in nearly every aspect of Egyptian society, on top of a larger defense budget that they were given, as well as tax exemptions and lucrative private contracts. Now, the Egyptian military has made major progress in modernizing its military since Sisi took power, with gradual procurements of new state-of-the-art weaponry, revamped supply chains, as well as more attention given to its navy. And we can see this in their new figures because their total military personnel sit at 920,000 and they have a defense budget of $11.2 billion. That jumped up from $4.4 billion.